Imagine waking up tomorrow to find that your morning coffee purchase has been declined. Not because you're broke, not because your card is damaged, but because an algorithm decided you've already bought too much caffeine this week. Sound impossible? It's not. In 2022, the Canadian government froze the bank accounts of hundreds of citizens. No trial, no conviction. Just a political disagreement, and suddenly, their money became inaccessible, their donations blocked, their ability to buy food, fuel, or medicine gone with a keystroke. But here's what most people missed about that moment. It wasn't about Canada. It was a preview. A test run for something much bigger that's already being built in over 130 countries right now. Today, we're going to trace the invisible thread connecting ancient financial control systems, modern banking surveillance, and the coming wave of central bank digital currencies. And by the end, you'll see exactly how the freest-looking transaction system in history could become the most restrictive. The illusion of financial freedom. To understand where we're going, we need to understand where we've been. Most people believe they have financial freedom. After all, it's your money in your account, right? You earned it. You can spend it however you want, but that's never actually been true. Every monetary system in history has contained mechanisms of control. The question has always been, who controls the levers, and how visible are they? In ancient Rome, emperors debased currency by reducing silver content in coins, a hidden tax that silently stole wealth from citizens. In medieval Europe, kings recalled coins and reissued them at lower values, confiscating the difference. In 1933, FDR made private gold ownership illegal in America through Executive Order 6102, forcing citizens to sell their gold to the government at artificially low prices. The pattern is clear. When governments gain the technological ability to control money more directly, they use it. The birth of digital surveillance money. Fast forward to 1971. President Nixon closes the gold window, severing the dollar's last tie to physical commodity backing. Money becomes purely digital notation entries in ledgers, ones and zeros in databases. This moment is critical, but not for the reasons most people think. Yes, it allowed unlimited money printing. But more importantly, it transformed money from a physical object you possessed into a permission-based system you accessed. Your wealth became data, and data can be tracked, analyzed, frozen, or erased. By the 2000s, the infrastructure for financial surveillance was already sophisticated. The Patriot Act expanded government access to banking records without warrants. The Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network began collecting reports on every transaction over $10,000. Banks started filing millions of suspicious activity reports annually, often on perfectly legal behavior. But there was still a problem. From the control perspective, cash. Physical currency remained outside the surveillance grid, couldn't be tracked, analyzed, or remotely frozen. It was the escape valve, the analog backup in a digital world. And that's precisely why it had to go. Phase 1. The Groundwork 2008 to 2019, the 2008 financial crisis created the perfect justification. We need to prevent money laundering, authorities said. We need to stop terrorist financing. We need to crack down on tax evasion. Each argument was reasonable on its surface, but each one required the same solution. Less cash, more digital tracking, more centralized control. India made the boldest move in 2016. Prime Minister Modi announced that 86% of the currency in circulation would be invalidated overnight. Citizens had a narrow window to deposit their old bills or lose their value entirely. The official reason? Fighting corruption and black market activity? The reality was more complex. Millions of poor Indians who didn't have bank accounts or couldn't reach banks in time lost their savings. The digital payment companies celebrated record growth. The government gained unprecedented visibility into every transaction in the economy. But here's what most observers missed. It wasn't about ending corruption. It was about testing compliance. Could a government invalidate money overnight? Yes. Would citizens accept it? Yes. Could you force an entire economy to go digital in months? Yes. The experiment succeeded. Sweden followed different tactics, but pursued the same goal. Banks simply stopped offering cash services. Stores refused physical currency. Within a few years, Sweden became the world's most cashless society, not through law, but through coordinated institutional pressure. Then came COVID-19. Phase 2. The acceleration 202.02.02.2 might spread the virus, health authorities warned, despite no evidence supporting this claim. Suddenly, refusing cash became a public health measure. Social engineering disguised as safety. Lockdowns forced businesses to close, driving commerce online. Government stimulus payments were distributed digitally, requiring bank accounts to receive. The unbanked were systematically herded into the financial surveillance grid. But the real turning point came in February 2022 in Canada. Phase 3. The revelation: the trucker convoy. When Canadian truckers protested vaccine mandates by parking their vehicles in Ottawa, the response was predictable. Police dispersal, media criticism, political condemnation, standard procedure. And then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act for the first time in Canadian history. But what followed wasn't standard at all. The government compiled lists of protesters and donors. They shared these lists with banks, and the banks, without any judicial oversight, without charges, without trials, froze accounts. Not just the truckers' accounts. The accounts of people who donated $50 to their cause. Single mothers, retirees, small business owners. Their bank accounts were frozen. Their credit cards stopped working. Some had their insurance policies canceled. Tamara Litch, one of the protest organizers, was arrested and denied bail for weeks. Her crime? Accepting donations through a legal crowdfunding platform? This is where the mask slipped completely. The Canadian government demonstrated something crucial. In a digital financial system, access to your money is not a right, it's a privilege that can be revoked instantly for political reasons. No court order required, no due process, no appeals process. Just an accusation, a list, and a keystroke. Phase 4. The normalization 2022 present. The disturbing part wasn't just what happened, it was what happened next. Almost nothing. There was no mass outcry, no constitutional crisis. The mechanisms remained in place, and other governments took notes. The European Union began drafting regulations to ban cash transactions over 10,000 euros, then reduced it to 7,000 euros in some proposals. The United States expanded civil asset forfeiture laws, allowing authorities to seize cash without criminal charges, but these were just preparations for the main event. Enter central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. What makes CBDCs different? Most people think CBDCs are just digital versions of existing money. After all, we already use digital payments, right? What's the difference? Everything. When you use a credit card or payment app today, your transaction is processed through private intermediaries, banks, payment processors, card networks. There are layers of separation between you and the government. Legal protections, privacy policies, competition between providers. CBDCs eliminate all of that. Central bank digital currency is a direct liability of the central bank. Every unit is tracked in a government ledger. Every transaction is visible to authorities in real time. Most importantly, every CBDC can be programmed with rules about how, when, where, and on what you can spend it. This isn't speculation. It's in the design specifications. The programmable money trap. The Bank for International Settlements, the central bank of central banks, has published papers enthusiastically describing CBDC capabilities, expiration dates on money, forcing you to spend within a certain time frame, geographic restrictions, preventing spending outside approved zones, category restrictions, blocking purchases of politically disfavored products, negative interest rates, automatically deducting percentages of your balance, dynamic taxation, adjusting tax rates based on your behavior, social credit integration, tying your purchasing power to compliance scores. China's digital yuan is already testing these features. During COVID lockdowns, Chinese authorities programmed a digital currency to expire if not spent at local businesses within days. Other batches could only be used on green products. Some couldn't be saved, only spent immediately. This isn't dystopian speculation. It's operational reality right now, in the world's second largest economy. The data panopticon, but the control goes deeper than spending restrictions. CBDCs create a complete financial panopticon, a surveillance system where every economic action becomes government data. Think about what your transaction history reveals: where you live, where you work, your political affiliations through donations, your health conditions through pharmacy and medical purchases, your relationships through shared transactions, your habits, your beliefs, your vulnerabilities. In 2023, Bank of America handed over customer data to the FBI without warrants following the January 6th Capitol incident. Searching for customers who made transactions in the D.C. area during that time frame, regardless of whether they attended the event or committed crimes. Now, imagine that power amplified 1,000 times. No need to request data from banks. No paper trail of requests. No possibility of a bank refusing. The government simply has the data in real time automatically. The shocking numbers, the scale of this transformation is staggering. Over 130 countries representing 98% of global GDP are exploring CBDCs. 64 countries are in advanced stages of development or pilot programs. China has already processed over $250 billion in digital yuan transactions. The European Central Bank is actively developing the digital euro with a target rollout within years. The Federal Reserve has published detailed technical specifications for a digital dollar. This isn't a future possibility. The infrastructure is being built right now. The historical echo history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. And the rhythm here is unmistakable. Every authoritarian system has followed the same playbook. Step 1. Create a crisis, real or exaggerated. Step 2. Offer a solution that requires surrendering freedom. Step 3. Implement the solution as temporary. Step 4. Make it permanent. Step 5. Expand it beyond the original scope. The pattern is playing out again. The crisis, terrorism, money laundering, tax evasion. Pandemic response. The solution. Eliminate cash, mandate digital payments. Implement CBDCs. The promise. It's for your safety, your convenience, your protection. The reality, unprecedented control, surveillance, and the power to exclude anyone from economic participation instantly. Why this time is different, but there's something unique about this moment. Previous control systems had limits. A king could debase coins, but people could barter. A government could freeze your bank account, but you could use cash. Authoritarian regimes could control internal commerce, but international transactions offered escape routes. CBDCs closed the last exits. Once implemented fully, there is no alternative currency to flee to, no underground economy to fall back on, no way to transact outside the system. The control becomes total, frictionless, and automatic. And here's the most unsettling part. Most people will welcome it because it will be convenient. Instant transfers. No need for wallets, rewards programs, lower fees. Cage will be comfortable, at least at first. Takeaway 1. Convenience is the Trojan horse. Every expansion of government power is sold as convenience. And often, it is convenient right, up until you need to do something the system doesn't approve of. The question isn't whether digital currency is convenient, it's whether that convenience is worth surrendering the ability to make financial transactions privately and without permission. Because once that power is centralized, once that infrastructure exists, it will be used, not might be used, will be used. Power always expands to fill its technical capabilities. Takeaway 2. The system will target dissent first. When these controls are activated, and they won't start with criminals. They'll start with political dissidents, protesters, and people expressing unpopular opinions. We've already seen this movie. We know how it ends. The Canadian truckers weren't violent criminals. The January 6th Bank of America data sweep caught thousands of innocent people. China's social credit system targets people for criticism of the government. The pattern is consistent. Financial control systems are used to suppress dissent first, crimes second. Takeaway 3. The time to act is before implementation. Once CBDCs are fully implemented and cash is eliminated, resistance becomes exponentially harder. How do you organize politically if donations can be blocked? How do you protest if your transit card can be revoked? How do you speak freely if your income can be switched off? The window to push back is now, while alternatives still exist, while cash is still accepted, while decentralized systems are still legal, while the infrastructure is still being debated rather than deployed. The fork in the road, we're standing at a genuine crossroads in human history. The decisions made in the next few years will determine whether the 21st century becomes an era of unprecedented freedom or unprecedented control. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The architecture of control is being built openly, in plain sight, with sophisticated public relations campaigns. It's being sold as innovation, as progress, as inevitable. But it's not inevitable.
Nothing is inevitable.
These systems require our adoption, our compliance, our acceptance. So the question isn't really about central bank digital currencies. The question is, what kind of society do we want to live in? Do we want a society where every purchase requires permission? Where algorithms decide what you can buy based on your political views or social credit score? Where your ability to feed your family can be switched off remotely for wrongthink? Or do we want a society where financial privacy is protected, where transactions don't require government approval, where you genuinely control your own wealth? The choice ahead, the tools of financial control are being assembled right now. The legal frameworks are being drafted. The pilot programs are running. The public is being conditioned to accept the transition through 1,000 small steps, each one seemingly reasonable in isolation. But the cumulative effect is a system of control so sophisticated, so comprehensive, so invisible in its daily operation that previous authoritarian regimes could only dream of it. The question is whether we'll see it coming before it's too late. If this video made you think differently about where our financial systems are heading, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This channel is dedicated to following the money, not just where it goes, but who controls it and why. Drop a comment below. Do you think CBDCs are inevitable? Would you use a central bank digital currency if it was the only option? What safeguards, if any, would make you comfortable with programmable money? And check out the video I've linked in the description about how the Federal Reserve actually works. Because understanding who controls money today is essential to understanding who will control it tomorrow. The grip is tightening. The question is whether we'll notice before it closes completely. I'll see you in the next one.